They have a water transport or a canal system. So exactly at the center of the sponge, there is a water transport system wherein water enters into the sponge and leaves out of the sponge through this water canal system. One organism itself will have both the male and the female reproductive structure in it. That is, the sexes are not separate. The question can be framed like this. Choanocytes in sponges are also called as. So the answer will be collar cells there. So they can change the questions in many ways and ask. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to this session on first PUC Biology. I am Dr. Divya, Biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. So in this session, let us learn about a topic, phylum Porifera, under chapter 4, Animal Kingdom. So let's study the characteristics of phylum Porifera, that is sponges, and then move on to learning about some of the MCQs that can be framed under this particular topic. So talking about phylum Porifera, as I told you, they are commonly called as the sponges or the sea sponges. Their habitat is marine, that is, they live in oceans and in seas, and they are primitive multicellular animals, that is, they are the first formed. So primitive means they are the multicellular animals that have been formed for the first formed multicellular animals. So these are the multicellular animals that came into this earth earlier itself, or first formed. And they have cellular level of organization wherein they are made up of multiple number of cells. Now you can ask me, like, they are made up of multiple number of cells, then it should have been a tissue level of organization, right? But here what happens here is the cells are loosely arranged and wherein each cell has its own specific function. They don't come together to perform a particular function, but the cells individually they perform a particular function. So therefore, the level of organization is cellular level. Next, talking about the body characteristic, they have a water transport or a canal system. So exactly at the center of the sponge, there is a water transport system wherein water enters into the sponge and leaves out of the sponge through this water canal system. And this pathway of water that is there, or the water canal system that is there, not only allows the movement of water inside the sponge, but also it helps the sponge to gather food and also for respiration, that is for exchange of gases, for all that, and also for excretion, that is to remove the unwanted material or for removal of waste. Also this pathway of water transport is very, very helpful in the case of sponges. And talking about the digestion in sponges, it is nothing but intracellular. So meaning inside the cell itself the digestion will take place. So they don't have a particular digestive system like how we have, right? So because they're just made up of cells, they have cellular level of organization. So whatever digestion of food takes place, it takes place inside the cells itself. And talking about their body symmetry, do they have a body symmetry? No, they are asymmetrical. So what is symmetry? Symmetry is nothing but wherein if we draw exactly a line at the center, one half of the other should look exactly the mirror image or copy of the second half. But in the case of sponges, it doesn't happen. See, for example, here if I draw a line exactly at the center, is this half looking exactly like the other half? No, right? So therefore, it doesn't have a symmetry. It means asymmetry. The opposite of symmetry is asymmetry. Exact. Here also the same thing. If I draw a line here, this half doesn't look like the other half. So that is why it is asymmetrical in nature. And if you look at the body of sponges, they have many minute openings or very small pores called as ostia. And it is through this ostia that the water enters into the sponge and then it goes into the water canal. So can you see here, all these are nothing but ostias, they are minute pores. So here small minute pores that are there, it is ostia. And they have a cavity, which is, because cavity, it means coelom, right? So It is called as spongiocele. So into the spongiocele, the water enters. The water goes through minute pores called ostia. Then it enters into the spongiocele, which is a water transport system or a water canal system. And then it comes out of the sponges. The excess of water that is there has to come out, right? It comes out of the sponges through opening called as osculum. And when we look at the body of the sponges, that is outer surface of the sponges or the skeleton of sponges, it is made up of spicules or spongin fibers. So the body of sponge is covered by spicules or spongin fibers. On the spicules of spongin fiber, there are minute pores called as ostia, and water enters into the ostia and then goes into the water canal system, which is called as the spongiocele. And once it enters into the spongiocele, it comes out of the operculum or osculum. So the water comes out of the osculum. And talking about the reproduction in sponges, they are hermaphrodites. So hermaphrodites mean, or you can say they are monoecious, wherein one organism itself will have both the male and the female reproductive structure in it. That is, the sexes are not separate. There is no separate male sponge or a separate female sponge. There will be one particular organism, one sponge, and in that only both male and female reproductive structures will be present. And their reproduction can be asexual and sexual. If it is asexual, it can be by fragmentation, wherein they break into pieces and develop into new organism. And if it is sexual, it can be by the male and the female gametes. And talking about the fertilization, the male gamete fuses with the female gamete inside the body of the sponge itself. Therefore, the fertilization is internal. And talking about the development, it is indirect. Indirect development means wherein they have a larval stage. Can you see here? Inside the body of the sponge, fertilization will take place wherein the egg cell will be there. The gamete, this is the male gamete. So, this one, that is the male gamete, fuses with the egg, that is the female gamete. So, egg cell is the female gamete, and it forms a larva. So, it forms a larva. This larva then develops into a new sponge. So, therefore, the development is indirect here, because in between there is a separate stage called as the larva stage, wherein later on it develops into adult. So, this is about the reproduction. Next, talking about some of the examples of sponges, there is cycon. So, cycon, which is also called as cypha. So, here we have cycon. It's also called as cypha. And then we have spongilla, which is a freshwater sponge. So, spongilla is a freshwater sponge. And there is euspongia, which is also called as bath sponge. So, this you have to remember, because spongilla is the only freshwater sponge. Cycon and euspongia both are marine. But why habitat we mentioned as marine is because most of the sponges are marine other than spongilla. Spongilla is the only freshwater sponge that is there. So, these are the examples of sponges. So, now let's look into the MCQs under this phylum Porifera. So, phylum dash are commonly known as sponges, or they can ask phylum Porifera are commonly known as dash. So, like that also question can be framed. So, here phylum Porifera are commonly known as sponges. So, phylum Porifera are commonly known as sponges. So, phylum Porifera are commonly known as dash means if the question was like that, you should have written sponges. Next, sponges have a central cavity called. So, at the center, there is a water canal system, which is nothing but a cavity, right, in sponge. What is it called? It is a coelom. So, whenever the word cavity comes, imagine it is coelom. Remember, it is coelom. So, here, coel, C-O-E-L. Therefore, this should be the answer. It is spongiocele. But is it ostia? No, because ostia is the opening of the pores. Is it osculum? No, osculum is the opening that is present at the top of the sponge, which helps the water to go out of the sponge. Is it spicules? No, spicules are nothing but spongin fibers, which forms the skeleton of the sponge. Next, the collar cells in sponges are called as, what are these collar cells? So, we know that sponges have a water canal system wherein they have the spongiocele, that is cavity at the center, right? So, these water canal systems are lined by minute cells, and those cells are nothing but called as collar cells. Okay, so these collar cells are also called as choanocytes. Is it spongin fibers? No, it's not osculum, it is not neither ostia. The answer is choanocytes, or the question can be framed like this. Choanocytes in sponges are also called as. So the answer will be collar cells there. So they can change the questions in many ways and ask. Next one, the spicules in sponges are made of. What is it made up of? Spicules are nothing but the skeleton of sponges. What is it exactly made up of? So it is made up of spongin fibers, not osculum. Again, because osculum is the opening through which the water goes out of the sponge. Ostia is the minute pores that are present in the sponge. Choanocytes are nothing but the collar cells that are present in the water canal system. Next, dash is an hermaphrodite. So what are hermaphrodites? They are the ones in which in one individual only both male and female reproductive structures are present. So which are those? Arthropods? No, arthropods have a separate male and a female organism. Chondrichthyes also, amphibians also. It is the poriferans, or instead of poriferans they can write it as sponges also here. Or they can give the example like cycon. So like that they can write the example of sponge also. You have to be careful with that. Next one, dash is an example for asymmetrical body organization. Is it platyhelminths? No, platyhelminth shows bilateral symmetry. Asculminths also show bilateral, annelids also, and it is sponges because sponges do not have a symmetry. You cannot divide the sponge, or when you draw a line at the center of the sponge, one half doesn't look exactly like the other half. So therefore, sponges are asymmetric. Next, sponges exhibit dash level of organization. Is it tissue, organ system? No, it is cellular, because I told you in sponges they are made up of multiple cells which are loosely arranged, and each cell has its own function. So they don't have a organ system level or a organ level or a tissue level, and the digestion takes place, all that takes place inside the cell itself. There is no particular organ for that. Next, the minute pores in sponges for entry of water is called, it is called ostia. It is not osculum because that is the opening for the exit of water. Next, dash is an example for sponges. Is it cycon, pleurobrachia, hydra or pila? Not pila, neither hydra nor pleurobrachia. It is cycon. Cycon is an example for sponges here. Okay, dash is a freshwater sponge. Is it cycon, spongilla, euspongia, none of the above? It is cycon because euspongia and spongilla, they are marine sponges, or they can give another name for this also instead of cycon. So you have to be careful with that. So this was about the session wherein under animal kingdom we studied the phylum Porifera, which are also called as sponges. We learnt its general body characteristics, and also we came to know what type of MCQs can be framed under this particular topic. So apart from this, based on this only, different MCQs can be asked. The questions can be twisted and asked, so you have to be careful with that. So this was about the session. So I hope you understood it. We shall meet again in the coming sessions wherein we'll discuss another new topic and its MCQs. So see you in the next session. Thank you.